one of the issues that you flagged that I've spent hours thinking about, and initially when I saw it, I was like, oh, no way. So let's talk about that, because I do want to have like a, try and have a really healthy debate about it, like what we can do. And as if the topics
What is
that you
it?
don't as if the topics that you cover are not controversial enough, how about the men's right to choose?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So tell
Sure.
us
Well, I
about
mean,
the right to choose.
I don't. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir if I talk to you about women's right to choose. Personally, I'm pro-choice. I've always been pro-choice. I fundamentally believe that the choice of when or if to become a parent should be down to the parent, not themselves. I've been kind of horrified to see what's happening in America to women's right to choose, and I would like to see that conversation extended to men. So men after conception don't have the right to choose; they're beholden to the decision of their mother. Whether she keeps that or not is her choice, as it should be. And I'm not arguing that he should be able to override her choice in any way. Absolutely not. But I feel like he should be able to potentially exercise his own choice to be a parent in the same way that she does through her right to have an abortion or take the morning after pill. He should be able to opt in or out of all privileges and responsibilities to that child if he makes the mother to be aware of his decision early in the pregnancy. So a man
Mm-hmm.
and a woman, they have sex. Let's say she becomes pregnant. Let's say they wore a condom or didn't, but she's become pregnant. She has the right to choose whether she keeps that child. And I'm saying that should he also have that right to opt in or out of parenthood? And so she can make an informed decision. Ultimately, the question is an independent woman making a unilateral decision of becoming a parent, should she be able to expect a man to finance that choice? I don't think she should. I feel like a man should have the same choice, and he shouldn't have to finance a choice that she's making autonomously. And a lot of people say, well, if he didn't want to be a dad, he shouldn't have had sex. But I'm like, well, I'm pro-choice. I don't think consenting to sex
Mm-hmm.
is consenting to parenthood. Like that's one of the core tenets of feminism. Like consenting to sex is not consenting to parenthood. And yet, whenever I talk about a father's right, that's the first thing they say. And I'm like, does that not apply to men? A woman who has sex shouldn't. She's not saying I want to be a parent. She's saying I want to have sex. Same for men. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about that. Again, that's a conversation that's not happening. I'm not sure if I'm entirely behind the idea of allowing men that right. It's called a paper abortion, or more recently known as voluntary parental surrender. I don't know how I feel about it, but I want to have that discussion. But we're not having that
Mm-hmm.
discussion apart from right now. And it's like, again,
No.
this conversation should be had by more qualified economists, politicians, political scientists, psychologists. I don't know. Not this is it should be had. It should be a debate that's worth having. And I feel like allowing a man to choose whether he becomes a dad is a really great way of ensuring we have great dads. And we all benefit from having great dads, committed dads who chose to become one, rather than
Mm-hmm.
being legally compelled or blackmailed into being a dad, which is currently what we're doing.
Yeah.
So
I
that's the
think the
right to
reason
choose.
why that bit irked me is naturally, I don't want to actually get into the conversation about abortion because that could be like 2 hours long. But
Yeah.
me personally, I
Yeah.
sit a little bit more on the conservative side. So I actually don't believe that we are in the position where we could ban abortion without just an absolute mess, and we've created that mess. But I do think that we should have more restrictions than we currently have, and that currently the UK is, for example, trying to get to in terms of very late stage
Mm.
abortions. But that's me and
Well,
sort of my conservative bent, without even putting any moral judgment on the abortion, whether it's moral right. The fact that currently we do have this imbalance where women are afforded the rights essentially that men aren't in the same way. But
mm,
what's the sort of bit that I find difficult is we know that men on average are higher in social sexuality that women are, but then also men do actually have two successful mating strategies. So you can be a devoted father of few children, for example, or several children, or you can be very, very undevoted father of 20 or 30. And, several of them will sort of make it into the future. Now, this is assuming that you're going to sort of work on yourself, because you wouldn't be able to just easily impregnate like 30 women. You would need to have something about you, whether it's charm, money, status, you name it. But essentially, because of that higher social sexuality, and because of the two, technically in evolutionary sort of successful mating strategies, women only have got one successful sort of reproductive strategy, and that is high investment. So I think that if we had that, even though that I agree that on the opportunity side, that would be level, that would produce disproportionate amount of women that would be left, and kids essentially that would be left disadvantaged, because there will be a small percentage of men that will game that system like mad.
Mm.
And it is difficult, because I am now, right now, discriminating against men in favor of women, knowing that some women also play that system. And it
Yeah.
gives me no satisfaction to do that. But I think that's where I land right now.
Well, thing is, I know. I mean, I know plenty of men who have been pushed into a place of fatherhood against their will, having told the mother that they don't want to be a dad, and she got pregnant, either intentionally or unintentionally, in a way, and then forced him to become a dad, and then financing that choice. So, I mean, he's going to pay for that child for 18 years or
Yeah.
more. So the gaming of the system has already begun. And because that man has no ability to, but I don't want this child. I never want this child. It's not something I don't want to. I'm not certainly want to pay for it. That's the system that's already set up. So there's gaming either way. Um, and yeah, I mean, although I mean you sound more pro-life than I am pro-choice. You seem to be pro-life, and although I don't agree, I do respect your opinion of being sort of consistent. Like rather than people that are pro-choice for women and then seem to be pro-life for men. Like don't they want to give women choice but not men. So that's where I'm most confused. But there's an interesting theory of it's called Donahue-Levitt hypothesis, and it was a really interesting, controversial economics theory from the 90s in America that looked at in America there was basically a massive crime spike of violence right across the nation. That through the 70s and 80s it was going up, and it got to the 90s to the point where they were talking about rivers of blood running through New York. And then suddenly crime came down in the 90s, and a lot of people didn't know why. They were asking, is it increased policing? Is it higher sentences? Is it a change in drug reform? Is it more police officers? And then two economists, Donahue and Levitt, came along and said, we think it's the fact that abortion was legalized a generation earlier. And they hypothesized that because women were given the right to choose to become a parent or not, they weren't being forced into raising children they didn't want and couldn't afford. And they argued that criminality in young juveniles, particularly males, criminality is caused by unwantedness, and unwantedness is reduced by abortion. So by not allowing women to choose, they were having children against their will. They didn't want, that they might resent, or at least didn't want. They can't afford it. They're not going to be a great parent because they don't want to become a parent. Like a good parent is one that chose to become one. A bad parent is one that's forced into it. So a generation earlier than 1990s, women were given that choice to become a parent or not, and that's what they argued led to a decrease in crime because of reduced wantonness and therefore reduced criminality. And I look at the same. I would say the same now. Like we're having quite a huge spike in knife crime in the UK, and there's obviously a lot of crime
Yeah.
in America. A lot of that's coming from fatherless homes, like boys that are growing up without a dad in their home, probably because he didn't want to become a dad and he left. And I'd say if we could find a way of putting more committed dads into households, especially households of boys, would we see a similar decrease in violent crime now? Is that the problem now, like fatherlessness? And can we reduce fatherlessness by giving men choice? So again, these are conversations that no one's having. I'm talking purely hypothetically, but I
Yeah.
mean they're interesting conversations that are unfairly shamed.
Yeah. I think in general we've come so far on the choices and giving individuals all sorts of freedoms that, just going back to, for example, banning abortion, I don't actually think it works. What I would really prefer
Mm.
to do is get really smart people that get the behavior of humans to create a completely different incentive structure. So for me, rather than like a blanket ban, which currently I don't think it would work, it's sort of reel it back a little bit, just temporary, and urgently put some healthy incentive structures, so we essentially get to the point where we just have less need for abortions. And I think
Mm.
it could be done again if there was interest. There doesn't seem to be much interest.